Sometimes I just hate life. So I normally love life, honestly. I love what I do, and problem solving is what I consider myself to do. Now, whether you're an engineer or a programmer or you're just a normal IT help desk person, what you're doing is solving problems, and I love solving problems. But there's one type of problem that I really hate, and that's what's known as an intermittent problem. Now, intermittent just means that sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there is no problem, sometimes there is. But let's talk about what is a problem. Well, generally a problem is when there is a difference between what you want something to do and what it does do. What I always ask people when they say that something isn't doing what they want it to do, I ask, what is it doing instead? So the thing is, this is an easier problem to solve because you can look at the problem and it is static. It is basically doing the same thing every time. Every time you want it to do the thing you want it to do, it does something else instead. Now, sometimes it's not the same instead all the time, but at least it's never working. That's the thing, that you are kind of stuck trying to solve this problem until you solve it. And that's because until you solve it, you don't have the thing that you want. And that sounds like a bad thing, but it actually could be a good thing if you think about it. So let me give you an example. I've been having issues with this computer. Honestly, I've been building computers my entire life. This one has been a pain in my neck. And you may have noticed that I'm running Windows 11 on this computer, even though I said that I'm not likely to be on Windows 11 anytime soon. I will explain. With a normal problem, if I was having an issue with this computer, I would just be forced to solve it, and I wouldn't be able to use the computer until I did. Well, in the problems I've been having with this computer, instead, I get these once a week to once a month problems. And I had Windows 10 installed on it, and once a month, maybe a little more often, I would get a blue screen of death. The problem is that when I analyzed this blue screen of death, it was always something different. Always something different had failed, which is not a very good sign. But I still wanted to fix it without spending a ton of money. So I did what I do sometimes with intermittent problems, and I kind of deployed a nuclear weapon. In this case, it was to install a completely different operating system. Now, I may have eventually solved that problem by actually finding that in my motherboard, the RAM was not running at the right frequency. It was set to auto in the motherboard, but when I analyzed the RAM, it was running lower in the frequency scale than it was designed to. So I, hard-coded it basically to run at the frequency it's supposed to. But at the same time, I installed Windows 11 because it had been months of me dealing with this problem, and honestly, it's something that most people probably just wouldn't have cared about because I didn't even know there was something wrong for a while. I would just notice that every once in a blue moon, the computer had restarted, I didn't restart it, and yet it had restarted and there was no Windows update. So that got me thinking, I wonder if there's a problem with this. So I turned on the diagnostics, and sure enough, one day I walked in and there was a big old blue screen of death. Now, most people just say, who cares? This happens once a month and it never seems to happen when I'm using it, but I can't deal with that. So I ended up fighting it and fighting it and fighting it until I found the RAM thing, but only after I tried the nuclear option of upgrading to Windows 11 to fix it. This is how infuriating an intermittent problem can be, because the intermittent problem is there, and you know it's there. And if you're like me and you're obsessive, you can't deal with the fact that it's there. Now, the truth is, me worrying about the problem at this point has done more damage than the problem ever would. Really, the problem never caused me any real life problems, but I couldn't deal with the fact that it's there. So you might think, well, problem solved. Well, that's the thing with an intermittent problem, is you never really know if it's solved, because for all you know, maybe you've changed something, but it's still kind of there. And the only way to figure out is to wait. And I generally multiply the intermittence time by 10 to be saying I'm anywhere near sure that this problem is solved. Now, if that's not bad enough, I have an even bigger problem now. Now, every once in a while, my entire network will go down. And when it does, I find this computer with a black screen, no blue screen of death, nothing to tell me what happened. I can't access the computer, the mouse is dead, and the entire network is down. The second I unplug this thing, the network comes back. So the only thing you can do with a problem like this, once you've gotten past the discovery stage, where you're kind of looking into, what do I need to do to figure out why this is happening? Once you've figured out that you can't figure out, the only thing you can do is test. And I do this a lot of time in code. I see that something's not doing what I want it to do. The first thing I'll do is investigate. Look at, did I make any simple mistakes in this code that are obviously causing this to happen? I'll think about, the symptom sounds like what is going wrong. And then eventually, if I can't just find it through investigating, I will start to change things, hoping that if I change things, it wouldn't necessarily, go to the point where it's working the way I want it to, but it will change its behavior in some way to give me an idea of why it's doing what it's doing. And I think this is a good way to solve problems. But when you have an intermittent problem, it is a terrible way to solve problems, because you end up changing the scenario and then just waiting and worrying and forgetting and overthinking, and you just come up with these new ideas that this is the way that it's going to be fixed. And eventually, you test that idea and you try it out and you think, you know what, okay, I bet you it's fixed now. And then a month later, it turns out it's totally not. Everything you had in mind was wrong, and that kind of can drive one insane. But another thing about an intermittent problem is it can actually outlive the life of the system. If the problem isn't actually causing that many practical detriments, then it's possible solving the problem just isn't worth it. Unfortunately, that won't stop people like me, whose literal job it is to solve these types of problems, and who are obsessive enough to want everything to be perfect all the time. So I have tried several things on this problem I have now. The newest one you may have noticed behind me, which is that speaker is not the same speaker that I had in previous videos. The reason for that is because I have theorized that perhaps the older speakers are shorting out, and that is causing issues. Now that may seem insane, but the reason I think that is because there was a week that went by where this problem didn't happen, where it was killing my network, but it's also done it several times in one day. So the week that went by, I was thinking, well, something was obviously in the right state then, and it changed to being in the wrong state. And the only thing I had done to this thing the day before was move some wires around. So I didn't unplug anything from the computer, I just moved some wires around. That made me think, all right, there must be something wrong with an attachment. And as attachments go, that's the most likely culprit. It's been through some stuff, it's gotten wet before, perhaps it's shorting out and causing the motherboard to fail. But the thing is, I can only hope that's the solution. I may figure out in a week, in a month, in a year, that this didn't solve the problem. And this is even worse in a workplace setting where you'll be tasked with solving this problem that might not be practical to solve. It might be better to leave the problem be and just do damage control with it. But the truth is, it is still your job to solve it. Sorry guys, this was a little bit of a vent. I hate intermittent problems. I will admit they are the minority of problems in both the workplace and in real life, but they haunt you over time. It's like a slow bleed. All right, everybody, have a good night.